Good evening, my dear children. How are you today? I hope you're all in good spirits and the hangover from Holi is yet not over. With everyone in good spirits, let me take this opportunity to present to you a topic which is very dear to me. And it is because of its high spiritual value, as you can see over here. This topic is called Science, the crisis in life. And as you can see, this topic you must have heard about this topic from the mouth of spiritual leaders, faith healers, motivational speakers, and they are all very good in it. I'm a huge fan of them. The way they present crisis and the spiritual value of it is excellent. But here, I'm not here today to give you this spiritual view because I'm a doctor. So what I'm going to do over here is that I'm going to give you the scientific view of this topic while also keeping alive the spiritual value of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you both the science and the spirituality of crisis. You must be wondering why. It is because, children, half knowledge is always, it's not good. It's like half knowledge always bounces, it shows, but there is no substance in it. And imagine this is a picture of our brain, which is like both sides. So how would it look if I only give you the half of the picture of it? This half or the other half? This beautiful picture of the brain is going to become ugly then. So if you want to keep this picture beautiful, you'll have to give the whole view, which means giving the full picture or the dual picture of the brain. So what it means, children, dual means strength. It's like 1 and 1 makes 11. So duality means strength. And you know, when it gets tough, when it gets tougher, only the tough gets going. So you have to have that strength. And for that, you need both sides of your brain so that you can go a far, far distance and achieve long-term goals, even when it gets tougher. It is very well said by Buddha. Drop by drop, the water pot fills. It's very well said. So all it requires is this hard work that I'm going to present to you. Children, this is the picture of a Mount Everest. Everybody knows Mount Everest. It's like a peak of IQ, intelligence quotient. But we are not going to scale this mountain today. Today, what we are going to do is we are going to scale a different mountain today. It's called Kailash Mountain. It's a sign of spirituality. It's like an emotional intelligence, and that's the scale we want to reach today. Right? So rock and roll, children, shall we move on? Now, presenting the dual picture of the brain is not an easy task to understand. It's slightly complicated, and it is even more difficult for me to present it. But we shouldn't be afraid of committing mistake and keep working hard. After all, if we don't mistake, how are we going to learn? So learning is a process where mistakes is human, actually. So children, let's not be afraid of committing mistake, and let's do what is difficult. Let's try and understand it. So shall we, children? Shall we rock and roll? So self-doubt, children. Have you ever suffered self-doubt? Have you ever had self-doubt, which means when you felt that you look different, there is something different is happening inside of you, and you don't know whether this is right or this is wrong. That's called self-doubt. Fear of rejection. Have you ever felt that because you're different, people are going to reject you? Fear of ridicule. Have you ever felt that because you're different, people are going to make fun of you? So these are doubts and fears that make our crisis. Crisis is made up of them, doubts and fears, and they make the core of our brain. So children, we are going to discuss doubts and fears slightly in detail and which form the core of our crisis. So children, does it mean that having fears and doubts lead to crisis? So crisis, anybody who has fears and doubts is in crisis. No, that's not true. In fact, what I have shown over here is a developmental phase, the childhood phase. And this is a growth, brain, a curve that shows the growth of brain during our childhood. As you can see, this blue is the real growth of the brain, and this curve in the pink is the expected growth in the brain. So everybody expects that our brain is going to grow like at a steady pace, like this pink curve is, but it don't happen like this. How it happens is, in the reality, the brain grows something like this. It's pretty much flat, as you can see. During the childhood, the brain growth is flat. It doesn't develop much. It remains very simple. And that's how our childhood is. It's very simple. There is no complication in it. That's why it is probably the most beautiful phase of our life. But that doesn't mean that the fears and doubts are not there. Fears and doubts are there, but they are lying dormant, and they are not active at this point, and they sleep and they keep in this dormancy phase till the time they get switched on, and I will come on to that. But for now, in the childhood, these fears and doubts are sleeping. So this is the beautiful phase. The child's mind is so beautiful and so uncomplicated, so simple. If you ask them philosophical questions like inner peace, probably they are going to run away saying dinner please. So that's why I call this phase like inner peace, dinner please phase. So I have shown the same thing over here. This is the expected growth, but in the reality, during the childhood, the brain growth remains pretty much flat. Adulthood, like means, we adults also have fears and doubts. I have fears and doubts, but do I look like I am in crisis? No, adults don't go into crisis because we are so used to having fears and doubts in our life that they don't bother us as much as they would qualify for a crisis. In fact, we have moved on in our life and we are probably in the next phase of development and we have other issues to handle. This is something called middle-age crisis. So, children, adults also have fears and doubts, but the quantity or the intensity is probably not even one-third of what an adolescent actually faces. So that is the phase I'm interested today, where the children are slightly grown up and where they are making a transition from a late adolescent into early adulthood. Here I've shown this phase very clearly. This is the most, I've reached the core of my presentation. And I think this is the graph which we are going to discuss slightly in detail, but very briefly. And if you can understand this, then I think it is job well done today. So I think we are through our crisis. So children, as I told you, during the childhood, the brain remains pretty much dormant. So it is like the brain has a core. And I will explain you like this, like a computer in your house, it has a core also. It is like an Intel core, generation 11, with an HC Iris program that gives significantly very not good, artificial intelligence, something like that. But a programmer, when the programmer writes his program, he writes with a pen, which is probably a few micron of a meter thick, or even better, a few hundreds of nanometer thick. But when God writes program with his pen, now that pen is very, very, very thin. So I'm talking about like the levels of few hundreds of picometer or few hundreds of femtometer. So what I'm trying to say that though we like to think of our brain like a computer, and it is somewhat like that, but it is much, much faster, much, much better version of it. So it's not possible for us to create a supercomputer like this. So what I'm saying that there are programs, like there are programs in the hard drive of your computer, so does brain has these programs. So the fear and doubts are written by the pen of God in our brain. And these programs are lying dormant during the childhood phase. Now what happens, like you can click a program on with this, you can start a program with a click of button. Similarly, these programs also have an on button, and they all get switched on over here, as you can see. And this switching on of these programs coincides with the with the with the surge of hormones in our body. And it appears that as though these hormones have turned these switches on. And these programs, and there are multiple programs in it, and they are all interconnected. So it's like a chain reaction. So once you turn a program on, it turns on a few more programs in turn, and then they turn further. So it's kind of a chain reaction, and the brain suddenly gets active, like I have shown over here. And you can see there is an exponential growth in the in the in, in the fears and doubts that in our brain. And as you can see, this is more like an impulse where a large amount of force is delivered in a short period of time. And this is, as you can see, is happening for the first time, where the child doesn't know what is happening to him because it is so new to him. It comes like a knockout punch to him, like a shock to him as to what is happening to him. So children, what happens? They go on like this, the fears and doubts. They keep on growing until they have consumed the whole core of the brain, and then the peak, and then they remain on the peak for a while, like, and it's quite a while that they remain on the peak, like 6 months to 1 year to even 2 years. And then they start slowly, coming down. And then, as I've shown over here, during the adulthood, the fears and doubts persist, but they are of low intensity. And then these fears and doubts remain with us for the rest of our life. So children, I think this developmental history of our brain is quite clear to you, and how do fears and doubts make appearance in us. So what is unique over here, that the fears and doubts, they make an appearance like a bolt from the blue. They appear so suddenly, and they are appearing for the first time, and the child doesn't know what to do with them. So it comes as a shock to all of us. So really, does it mean that do all the children suffer from crisis? Because in all the children, these fears and doubts hit them for the first time. So it's a very valid point. Do all the children suffer from it? The answer is no. It is not that all of the children will suffer from it. Then who are the one who will suffer from it? So children, this is a very big question, because what is involved over here is that fears and doubts not only make their appearance for the first time in our life during this phase, this transitional phase, but they also appear in a bulk, in a large amount. It's a whole volume of them. So what it involves is the knowledge of its dynamics of bulk, kinetics also, and maybe children, you are being exposed to these concepts of motion, force, etc. So it involves these terms. So I will try and explain it to you in a very simple manner, which we are all aware of. Cricket ball. Most of us, all of us almost play cricket. We all have an experience with a cricket ball, or we have taken a ride on a roller coaster. So take it for example, like cricket ball. So when you catch a cricket ball, it comes at you and you take it in your hand and then you push your hands downwards. So why do you pull your hands downwards? It is because that increases the time the ball delivers the momentum to the hand, and this time. So what happens is all that force that is delivered to the hand, and we increase the time in which it is delivered. So that impulse becomes weaker. And if we hold the ball by keeping like this hands and we don't draw them down, so the ball will hit very hard and we might injure our hand as well. So have you gotten the point? Or it is like if you take a ride on a roller coaster. Some of these roller coasters are very steep. They are very dangerous. They give you a feeling as if you're falling freely under gravity. And you feel in your tummy that G-force. And that's the sensation. On the other hand, there are other roller coasters which are not so steep and which take it mild. So those rides are much more smoother. So these two examples should make it clear what I'm trying to say. Here I've taken the example, again the same graph, children. I've taken the example of 3 children over here. Now the green one, as you can see, is like he has caught the ball, cricket ball, and he hasn't drawn his hand down. Or he is riding a very steep roller coaster. Look at the way his graph has gone up and come down. While the child in the pink is milder, he suffers a milder impulse, and mildest impulse is suffered by the child in the orange. Though the area under the graph for all these 3 curves are the same, that means all these 3 children suffer the same amount of fears and doubts. But in the green one, it is delivered like a punch because of the kinetics over here. It's a strong impulse. It hits him like a strong wave. While the pink one is milder and the orange one is the mildest. So it is not very difficult to understand which one of these 3 children is going to suffer from crisis. Obviously, the green one. The green one, and I have tried to relate it with the emotional quotient over here. The green child has a low emotional quotient, while the emotional quotient for the orange child is the highest. That means higher emotional quotient saves us from going into crisis. So, children, what is emotional quotient? We should learn a bit about this as well, because it saves us from going into crisis or bad phases in life. As you have seen, you must have seen pictures of brain everywhere, somewhat like this, and where we draw the left side and the right side, and they say that right side is the emotional side, left side is the thinking type. So it is somewhat like this. Instead of left and right, it is somewhat like this. The emotional side of the brain is slightly below. It's here, right here, in the base, where there is temporal cortex, where there is midbrain, brainstem, and we think emotionally from here. So when we think, emotional. So when we are relaxing and feeling, we like to lie like this, relaxing posture. And when we are thinking, we like to think like this. This is a thinking posture. So we think with here, the anterior portion, and we feel from here, the posterior portion. But you can see that in the anterior portion, there is some pink over there also. So there are emotions in the front portion also. But and there are some white in the posterior portion. But here we are thinking emotionally with our feelings, while here we are thinking logically. So is that thing clear to you? So this is the emotional side of the brain. What happens, this side is responsible for emotional quotient. Now what happens, this side is the home to feelings, values, customs, traditions. They are all in this emotional side of the brain. And who gives us all? Parents. They are the best caregivers for us. Teachers are the second defense of line. And have you heard the phrase where it says, if the teacher and God are standing side by side, who are you going to touch feet first? It is said that you go and touch the feet of the teacher who has led you to God. So teachers are very important. They give us a very good EQ, emotional quotient. Grandparents are very important. Please don't throw them out of the house. They are very useful. When it comes to emotional quotient, nobody is more experienced than them. So grandparents, obviously, uncles and aunts also contribute, and the role models. So, so what I'll tell you, and it is an advice to the parents if they are also listening, and I'll say that prevention is the best cure. So if you want to prevent your child from going into crisis when he's a little grown up, then better start spending some quality time with them in their childhood phase, when the brain is still like lying dormant and the fears and doubts are still sleeping. That's the best time, the childhood time, when the parents, the teachers, and all the elders, caregivers, they feed you, or they hardwire these values, these customs, traditions in us. And they act as a preventive measure against a child going into crisis. As you can see over here, the child in the orange has not been instilled, given emotional quotient so well, and it goes into crisis, while the child in the pink has very good values developed in him, and as you can see, he doesn't go into crisis. So parents, that's my advice to you. Prevention is the best cure, and give your children the quality time, the best time, and give them the best values, and that will help them go a long, long way. Lastly, children, what happens if there is some delay in giving you emotional quotient? I'll give you an example of this great scientist, astronomer, mathematician from a long time ago. He was like more than 400 years ago, Nicholas Copernicus. You must be wondering what about him and how is he relevant today? See, he was, whenever I have tried to search for an example that represents the dual side of the brain, he is probably the most prominent and easiest to understand. He was not only a great scientist, a mathematician, but he was a saintly person too. He was primarily a religious man. He used to work for, he was a Catholic gun who used to collect taxes for the church. Most of my understanding of duality has come from learning the life history of this great person. This man had a tough childhood and he lost his parents early, yet he could build on his emotional quotient. He was very high in his emotional quotient. And, he suffered a lot of fears and doubts in him, yet he continued. There's a lot to be learned from him. Albert Einstein, on the other hand, very intelligent man, very high IQ. He gave us universal constant. That's the best thing he would ever give to us. Had a very high IQ, but compared with Nicholas Copernicus, his EQ was slightly lower. And he was always searching for that inner peace. And he move towards the to the religion after a while so that he can get some peace. So these two examples actually demonstrates that having a high IQ is so very much important. So if Nicholas Copernicus had not thought differently 400 years ago, then we would have still been stuck in those dark ages. And the evidence has it, children, that for 2000 years before him, there was no major invention. And we were going, the, the society was stuck at a point. In fact, we were going backwards. The religion was getting infested by superstition, bizarre rituals, violence, bloodbath. So it is thanks to this man who provided, who, who paved the path for others, great others like Galileo, Kepler, Newton, and Albert Einstein, and many others who invented and who gave a push to us, to our life, so that it started to move forward again. And all this life is because of these persons, and they all suffered from fears and doubts, but that didn't stop them. So, children, if you have fears and doubts, think about them. They will give you inspiration. So will Lionel Messi. You know, he is a great person. Who is not a fan of Lionel Messi? Or great Sachin Tendulkar, or Amitabh Bachchan from Kaun Banega Crorepati. They are all great people, and they have this constant in their mind. They have built a balance between the two sides of the brain. These are rare talents, children, and with hard work. As I said, drop by drop, the water pot fills. So you should also try and work hard and bring a balance, make a constant for yourself like these great persons. And then I will say that you will not have crisis. So thank you very much, children. If you have any questions, you can please ask me. Okay, so there is a question which says that which are the most common mental disorders in children. So I will say yes. This is the first and the foremost, where it is like we really call it adjustment disorder, the crisis. Then there is autism. Then there is mental retardation. There is attention deficit hyperactivity disorders, and there are problems of conduct also. Those are the common problems that children suffer from. There is another question which says that do the children get bored very frequently? No, it's not true. Children are actually very simple per mind. I have known children who you give them a toy like very simple toy which don't even cost much and they can spend their life being with it. Children don't get, that's why they have their favorite toy and they live their lives with it. So they don't get bored very frequently. Sugar intake in the children, excess of anything is bad, so is excessive take of sugar is also bad. So please, sugar is not bad for mind, but excessive sugar, yes. Of course, this is a good topic, and yes, your children gets agitated. Oh, you have to be very patient with them, and you can take some experts advice also in it, like what is the reason behind it? Is he suffering from anything very major, or is it just like this simple crisis just I described to you? So you can take an advice for that. What should I do if my child didn't understand anything? Okay, if your child doesn't understand, be patient with them. You still have to teach him the best of the values. And if there is any weak, you can show it to an expert. You can bring the child to us. Maybe we can do some IQ assessment. If there is no major problem, there is nothing to worry. Crisis needs some parental counselings, and how they should handle the children should be enough. So best child brain developmental activities is the way I've told you. Spend quality time with your children. Teach them good values, good. So I think that's the best activity you should do. And if you need in detail, you can contact us and we can tell you how can we do it. Okay. So children, thank you very much for being there and listening to me very patiently. I hope I was of some use to you all. Maybe next time, the way I described the constants, how did the Einstein made those constants? What is their value in our life? How can we create an equilibrium in our life? Maybe next time I can give you a more view, my best view, which is slightly more complicated, but we can try more complicated topics over here. Thank you very much. Good night.